Hello, my name is Matt. Welcome to Unbearable 73. It's time for me to review The Orville, Season 3, Episode 5, A Tale of Two Topas. Funny enough, when I first saw this, I was like, A Tale of Two Tapas? And I was thinking like the food, tapas. you know. But, so there we go. First, you can see from my shot in front of you, describing how I do these what I call mid-spoiler reviews, where I will talk about some spoilers for the current episode, and I will start the video by following up from my previous episode with a full spoiler of final thoughts on it, and that's the pattern for these until I hit the season summary review, and I'll just give a general sort of thoughts on the whole thing, how it came together. Now, as I said repeatedly in the previous episode, there's a lot in this episode to decompress out of it, so much so that I could talk about it for hours. However, I'm not going to make any of these reviews more than 20 minutes if I can help it, so some stuff has to be left unsaid. First, let me address what I suspect are many people's primary thoughts in this episode, that the Orville delved into political commentary via allegory with gently falling rain. I bet my bottom dollar that people on any side of the issues are going to see this episode as attacking their viewpoint and not the other one. So I'm just going to point out a couple of things. Not all of it, just a couple of them. McFarlane presents both the Union and the Krill as fully functional societies with flaws and morally suspect internal aspects. Okay. He does not merely present the Krill as bad guys because they follow a center-right path grounded in religious conservatism. He doesn't make the Union flawless good guys, as we see in the current episode, for example. Anyone remember the Mocklin? I wrote this last before I even knew what this episode was about. The Mocklin, a planet that engages in forced sex changes on people. How the Union was totally okay with that as long as the Mocklins were supplying them with weapons. And then we saw in this episode how the Union was totally willing to overrun the cultural aspects of their members, so long as they got what they wanted out of it. So the Union's a flawed society, the Krill are a flawed society, both are equally flawed. Now, even in the final moral confrontation episode, remember what exactly each person said. Ed asked Talea, "Why did you even have her?" Now, I note, he's referring to the daughter he had just met, and his paternal instinct kicked in, and he said he loved her. He said at some point he loved this girl, his daughter. He was perfectly willing to contemplate his living daughter, who he clearly now loved, having been aborted. That was his perspective, okay? And Talea's response was equally, stark. Like, would you like to see what happens to people on the planet? And then the first thing many people think is, well, then maybe they actually get them. They don't. They make it even worse, So it was the moral complexity of this episode and the political nature of it is not so different from some of the more classic Star Trek episodes from multiple series. But I'm not going to belabor talking about that aspect of it. All I want to say is, if you think it was somehow one-sided, you should go back and pay attention to how he's presenting the characters, not how you perceive the characters. Now, some other spoiler-friendly comments about plot events not related to politics. I have a feeling that McFarlane is planting an eye as a future way-out character for Mercer, meaning, there's rumors going around that McFarlane would like to continue the Orville but leave the show as a regular, or he's playing a definitive ending in a couple of seasons. I can see Anaya bridging the gap between Union and Krill, and maybe Mercer becomes an ambassador in a couple of years because his daughter is there, and that's the eventual future peace between the Krill and the Union. Or maybe he has to rescue Anaya from the Krill, and he gets promoted to an admiral, and so he can raise his daughter or whatever. There's a lot of logic involving the daughter being part of his way out. I said before, I think this is a great standalone episode, but in terms of evaluating its impact on the series, it's less great. I never wanted the Krill to become the perfect friends with the Union, but having to go back to enemies presents problems, and having to be enemies at all presents problems. What does this mean for resisting the Kaylon? Why aren't the Kaylon going to go on an all-out offensive immediately? Is McFarlane setting up the Krill to be crushed by the Kaylon for their arrogance and rejecting the treaty? And one final thing to cover. I mentioned that I was disappointed with Director 21 and effects on the plot. There are a lot of plot holes with them being able to effortlessly infiltrate the Krill via Director 21 in order to pull off that rescue. How did they get a Krill hover car? How did two people infiltrate the main Krill political center so effortlessly? I would have preferred Director 21 was something different, like maybe working with an active Krill underground or anything, to be honest. The rescue just didn't come across cleanly to me, and it felt more contrived. It took away from enjoyment. Now on the visuals, now we're going to the current episode, episode 5. So, and here are my biggest problems with this episode. Okay, on the direction, this episode just dragged on and on and on. As interesting as some aspects of the story might have been, I just kept wanting to do something else because I was bored. And so you get to the good part of the episode, you're enjoying it, some of the acting scenes and whatnot, and then all of a sudden you get a boring scene, or it take too long to get to the next scene or whatever. And the writing. This is the worst written episode of the series. I'm not referring to the content. There was almost 0 point to having the planet and the science mission involved. That would have cut 15 minutes out of this episode, which was like 1 hour and 20 minutes long. It would have cut down to 1 hour and 5 minutes. Or if they wanted to do 1 hour 20 minutes, they could have added more scenes involving the plot you cared about. The actors, however, did a great job. So that's no contest there. Now, on one hand, McFarlane actually manages to nuance this issue because Topa was born female and without consent changed into a male. McFarlane still managed to explore the transgender, transsexual issues, from all sides. On the other hand, the bloat in this episode detracted from the story. There's kind of a rule to follow when you're creating a story. It doesn't matter whether you're writing a book, or a team producing a movie or show, or a dungeon master making a campaign, or any other story. If the event or plot element can be completely edited out and nothing changes, okay, then it shouldn't be there to begin with. It's filler, basically. Okay, filler you don't need. The whole story element with them exploring the dead civilization was like that. The episode had a run length of like 1 hour and 20 minutes. I just mentioned that. I mean, it just felt long and drawn out and boring to me. I could most of the time with the Orville, I can watch it in one swoop, so to speak. This one I had to stop like 4 or 5 times to go do something else to and then regain my interest in it. Pretty much the only real story in this episode was the Topa storyline. Topa sought out Commander Grayson to mentor him in his desire to take the Union Point exam. Now, and this starts out well, but Topa is troubled. You can see that right away. The actress playing Topa in this show, episode, did pretty good. As it turns out, Topa feels that something is fundamentally wrong with him at a core level. He doesn't know what. And so he thinks maybe he can find it in the Union by becoming an explorer, because maybe he admires Commander Grayson in terms of that she seemed fulfilled by being a Union explorer. And he's on a ship with all these great Union officers who have that same sort of thing. And one of his parents is like that. As the story unfolds, we head towards the reveal to Topa that he was born female, and that there was a tribunal to decide if he should be changed to a male or not, and so forth. Now, another story aspect that unfolds out of that is the fracture points in Boris and Clyden's relationship. I can't go too far into the story discussion without blowing all spoilers, though. I did have another thought, I wonder if McFarlane or whomever came up with the Mocklins was inspired or influenced by the Tenctonese, or as most of you might have heard of them, the newcomers from Alien Nation. They have physical similarities. Their young are born from a sort of egg, and both parents nurture it. They're physically designed to live in a much harsher environment, and they have a species issue with the sexual minority group, so to speak. So, my final thoughts. I wanted to like this episode more than I did. If they took out the pointless archaeology subplot that literally goes nowhere, utterly, completely nowhere, that would have made this much more enjoyable, because I wouldn't have been bored. Like, every time an archaeology scene would come up, I'd be like, oh my god. I did think that they explored all the issues of Sonic Topa very well. I did think that the solution was a little contrived, not so much just some of the elements of it. Had this episode not been as plotty and slow without the distracting and pointless archaeology plot, I probably would have given it an 8.5, or maybe 8 or 8.5 out of 10. Only losing points for the contrived outcome parts and a couple other little flaws, So ultimately, though, however, this is a 5.5 out of 10 for me. I enjoyed the story, and I lose most of those points that have nothing to do with the actual Tale of Two Topas, but other parts. And I enjoyed the Topa storyline. I enjoyed Boris and Clyden's relationship issues, and the way what the actors did there. Comment down below if you have any questions for me about this video. Please share your thoughts. Share this video if you enjoyed it. Like if you like. Dislike if you dislike. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me. My name is Matt. This has been Unbearable 73. Have a nice day, and I am out of here.